Welcome to Talking Heads on USA Global TV, starring the one and only wonderful Dr. Jacqueline. It's a prestigious place where world-class influencers and experts meet, and where you'll find the most trusted advisors and coaches for all things in life and business. Visit usaglobaltv.com to sign up for our newsletter, get the value you need, and be first in line to learn about events and giveaways and other valuable content. Connect with us. Email Dr. Jacqueline at usaglobaltv.com to talk about how you can become part of USA Global TV. That's USA Global TV, where the doctor is always in.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to USA Global TV and Business Talk Radio. I'm Dr. Jacqueline Kerbeck, and our show today is Talking Heads. Our Talking Head expert today is Mariska du Preez. And if you're joining us for the first time and wondering, what is a talking head? That's a great question. A talking head is an expert from around the world who has at least 5 years of experience in their field. They are regarded as an expert. They have a huge following, and they are also really good at presentations. So Mariska du Preez is not only an expert talking head, she's also a co-host of our show Leadership of the Heart, which you can watch right here on USA Global TV on Mondays at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. She's an elevated listener, which means she gives you a safe space to share whatever it is you want to share with her. She's someone you need to get to know. She's a transformation and leadership coach, and she's my personal and my business coach. So let's welcome her to the show. Hello.
Hello. How are you today?
I'm fantastic. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well. We are going into autumn. I know you guys are going into spring. So the seasons are changing. It's that time of year where if it's spring, you start spring cleaning. If it's autumn, there's some cleaning practices happening too. So yeah. And maybe some mental cleaning practices will be in order as well.
I definitely agree with that. But one thing that's not going to change is that you show up every week and give us an outstanding presentation with really tangible things we can take away and implement into our lives. So I'm going to let you get to it. I will put up your deck and go backstage.
Okay. Well, let's then get started with today's lesson. So in this series that we are busy with, we are looking at awareness and all the different elements of awareness. So in the past couple of lessons, we went through different elements within our emotional awareness. And what we're looking at today is we're going to have a little bit of a look at our own biases as well as our blind spots. So as you can see, we are slowly but surely progressing up the ladder, and we have one more lesson after this one to complete our awareness series. So this is really exciting. So without further ado, let's get back into it. Question for you guys. You are more generous when you are A, old, B, young, C, rich, or D, poor. If your guess was A, old, you will be correct. So there's studies that show that when we feel older, and it's not necessarily that you have to be physically older. When we feel old, we actually act more generously towards others around us. And you might wonder, why would this be something to be aware of? Now, if you were not aware of this, we might have been biased in some way to think that if we are rich, we might be more generous, or if we are poor, because we know how difficult it is, we might be more generous. Or even that if we are young, we might feel more generous towards people. So knowing our own biases and the way that we think about things And our blind spots that we have actually helps us when we're functioning and creating in the world. Now, this study, to use it somewhere, for instance, if you have a non-for-profit and you are going door knocking or having somebody on the phone that is asking different people to actually donate some funds to your non-for-profit, knowing now that we feel more generous when we are older or when we feel older, it would be wise to either get somebody on the phone that has a youthful energy and a youthful voice, or if you are door knocking, to physically give that activity to younger people, because the likelihood that they are going to then encounter people that would be older than them are quite high, and thus increasing the likelihood of there being donations. See how these things work into life. So, when we look at biases and blind spots, the main thing to take into consideration with a bias is that it is an inclination towards something, or basically an aversion away from something, or a judgment against something. So we need to take into consideration that these are things that would be involved when we have a bias. Then when we think about a blind spot, so when you think about driving, when we're driving down the road and we look in front of us, that is definitely the piece that we can see. Normally, if you take your hands and you move it to the side of your head, you can still see your hands sort of in your peripheral vision. So there's still some awareness, but you can't exactly see. For instance, if I am holding fingers up on this side of my head, I can't see how many fingers I'm holding up. I can see that there's movement though. So I need to physically look at my hand. Oh, I'm holding up 2 fingers, right? So that's what happens on the side. But if we take our hands even further back, or if we're in our vehicle and it gets to about this part of our head, so a little bit further behind our eyes, we can physically not see there anymore. We can't see movement, we can't see anything, right? And that would be a blind spot. So when we're driving, we are quite aware of the fact that we need to actually move our head in order to look at our blind spot, which is the spot behind us, especially when we are doing maneuvers on the road, such as changing lanes or maybe turning into a driveway or a side road. So these areas also apply to us when we are physically in our heads and among other people. So the way that blind spots actually show up for us in our cognitive and experiential sort of environment is our understanding and interpretation of ideas and things around us. So it might be that we might not have all the information, our information might be lacking, there might be some spots there that we can only just see or not see at all. So these are blind spots. Now, we will go a little bit more in depth into both of them, and we will start with our bias. So, thinking about a bias, we get all sorts of different biases, and I thought I would share this cute little meme that I found. So the one guy is asking the other, did you fact check this before you reported it? And the other person is, I don't need to. It agrees with my perceived views and biases, so it must be true. This, of course, we will know would not necessarily be true. And if ever you have been in a tertiary institution, your professor would surely have told you that you need to go and get more than one argument. So, we're going to discuss 7 biases today, And we doing 7, but there's a load more, right? So I just took the top sort of 7, the ones that show up in general in our daily life and in our workplace, and we'll look at those ones a little bit deeper. But there is loads more biases, and I'm sure that when you Google them, you will definitely find a lot more. So the ones that we're looking at today is the Dunning-Kruger effect. So all of these biases is related to some way of cognitive bias. And when I'm saying cognitive bias, it is a way of thinking or a mental model that we have in place that is causing us to think a certain way and hence have this particular type of bias. So the one is the Dunning-Kruger one. Then the next one is the confirmation bias, the self-serving bias, the curse of knowledge. Ever thought knowledge can be a curse? Yes, it can. It gives us a bias. The hindsight bias, that hindsight being 2020, yeah. Optimism and pessimism bias, and then the decline bias. So let's start. The Dunning-Kruger bias. So what happens with the Dunning-Kruger bias is if we don't know anything, if we literally a novice in the field, we can fall into the trap of being very confident in what we know. So we start out a new project, or we start out a new field of expertise that we want to engage in, and we didn't just start, we actually got a little bit along the road of understanding the subject matter a little bit better. And we feel extremely proud of ourselves. We think we have all the knowledge we need. We know exactly everything that we were presented, and we're quite happy with that, right? So this puts us in danger of actually making a bit of a fool of ourselves, because there's most probably a lot of stuff that we still don't know. But we think we've learned this new thing, we're feeling very confident, and hence the bias. Now, as we learn more, we find that, oh, there is more to learn. This isn't quite everything that I thought. There's more to it than just the bit that I have. So when we start to notice that, we will go and learn more on the subject matter if we are so inclined and continue on that journey. Now, this specific bias can hit us a second time. So no, once you are learning more, you are not immune to it. It can happen again. So when we are in expert territory, what happens is we start to get very confident in what we know and the things within our field. And sometimes we have a tendency to stop looking around us because we already know everything that there's to know. And of course, we really don't. So this bias can, of course, show up again as in the cases where we are an expert. Although we are a little bit more aware of the fact that there might be stuff that we don't know, remember that thing about our peripheral vision? If it's behind us and we don't see it, we're not aware of it, this specific bias might come and bite you. Then the next one is the confirmation bias. So with the confirmation bias, one of the things is that it actually plays on our existing beliefs. So what we do is the beliefs we already hold are quite deeply ingrained for each of us, and we will find evidence and facts that only support those beliefs. This is human, it is normal, we all do it. The thing is, we need to be aware of the fact that we do it, because when we go and look for evidence for a specific topic and we want to really argue a point, it might be a presentation that we want to give, it might be a piece of research, or it might be a debate that we are participating in. We have a tendency to only look for the evidence that supports the belief that we already hold on a specific topic. Now, we need to be very aware of this because we need to realize that we need to play devil's advocate. We need to look for the ones that don't support our belief and actually go and have a look whether there's any valid information in there. And more often than not, there's going to be valid information in there, right? There's the saying about you have his truth, her truth, and then the truth somewhere in the middle. And this is what confirmation bias really is when we think about it. It is having both sides, or more even, not even just two, it might be more sides to it, that we need to take into consideration in order to have a complete picture of what it is that we want to be presenting or researching or whatever it might be. Then also, with confirmation bias, another thing, because we get so involved in the information itself, another thing that's really useful when we have a confirmation bias, or we even just suspect it, is to take a step back and get a different pair of eyes on it. Now, how does this help us as leaders? Well, as leaders, it would be really good to have a team around us that we actually have different points of view. And that's one of the reasons why diversity is so important. It helps us combat this specific bias. It helps us to see more elements to the same thing. So this bias can be combated in quite a few different ways. And it's always good to take into consideration how we want to approach this, and helping us do that is actually other people in our team, and not only the voices we like, also the voices we disagree with, because especially when we think about a confirmation bias, those voices are the voices that's going to help us most. So that is the confirmation bias one. And then we have self-serving bias. So the little graph I have here is basically a pie graph with mostly red, as you guys can see. And the red is my team is full of knobs. The blue, why we might have lost, is the enemy team is really good. So that takes up about a quarter of the pie graph. And you will, if you really squint, you'll see there's a very thin slither, right? And that thin slither says, I suck. So your self-serving bias, basically what that does for each one of us is when something is going really well, we go, yes, that was all me. Nobody else had any influence on it. When things go really bad, it's everybody else, maybe just a little bit me. So this is a self-serving bias, and it really serves us, right? It is, however, not necessarily the truth. This is very subjective, and it would go depending on which side of this graph you might have been on. So if you think about the same graph as our team one, so then you might see the red as that was all me, the blue as the rest of my team participated in it, and the little bit of green, yeah, that was the other team helping us out. So it can definitely color our perceptions of events quite negatively and quite positively And it is definitely a bias to be aware of within our team when we're getting feedback, when we're giving feedback, right? Being sure that we can objectively state these different points and the percentages next to them, and not on a, oh yeah, well, this is the way I feel about it. So taking those things into consideration. Then, of course, we have our next 4 biases, and I've paired them together. And the reason why I paired them together is they sort of work hand in hand to an extent. So the curse of knowledge and the hindsight bias works as follows. So curse of knowledge, when we don't know something, we assume everybody else don't know it. Once we've learned it, so say for instance, we have learned a little bit more about emotional intelligence and how to actually name our emotions, and now we are a little bit more equipped on how to handle our emotions and what to do with it. We think everybody can do it. And this is a bias because everybody can't do it. They haven't learned it yet. So that's the curse of knowledge. It actually works around that part where we know something or we've had an experience in something and we assume, very dangerous word, that everybody else does too. And this also goes for the hindsight bias in the sense that we will typically go through something, go through an experience, and then after the event sort of go, oh yeah, I knew it would work out that way. So we also know that we might have considered it. It might have been in our peripheral view, but if we really knew that that would have happened, we would have taken steps to prevent it from happening. So hindsight bias, one of the ways of actually taking both of these and helping us to grow in eliminating or mitigating for these biases is to be very aware of what our field of knowledge is and doing a little bit of a check on ourselves and in our team, whether this is the same for everybody or not. And then, of course, with hindsight bias, one of the best ways to mitigate for it and actually use it as a learning is to go and physically write down what we think is going to happen in this specific situation. So we're doing a risk assessment or we want to make a decision and we only have a certain amount of knowledge. So the knowledge or the information that we have is limited and we need to make a decision to do something specific. So what we do is we write down exactly what it is that we know at this point in time. And we also write down all the things that we considered for the risks that we might be exposed to. And then we write down the decision that we want to make in this regard. Then, after the fact, we go back to that. First, we write down what we now know. So our new knowledge that we have, the new risks that we have seen we needed to consider, right? And then we take the two and we actually put them together and see from the before and the after, what is there that we missed? This sort of plays into our blind spot part of this lesson. As you guys can see, the before is what we were able to see, and of course the after might reveal stuff that either was in our peripheral or was actually behind us and we weren't even aware of it. So this is a great little exercise to help us with this specific bias. Then our optimism, pessimism, and decline bias. So what that is when we are feeling really optimistic, we have a tendency to think everything will work out. We have the hope, we have the dreams, we have everything we need. It will definitely work out, no doubt in my mind. On the other hand, if we are feeling very pessimistic, nothing will work out. It's the worst idea ever. It won't work no matter how hard we try. Forget it. This is, don't even start it. Right. So that's the optimism, pessimism biases. So taking into consideration where we are emotionally, and again, with our confirmation bias, this is basically a confirmation bias, but it is focused on our emotional confirmation. When we have this bias at play, think about inviting other people into that discussion that would not have that specific emotion at that time. And of course, do go through the emotional intelligence learnings first, because remember, emotions can be contagious. So we also don't want to contaminate our thinking environment. Then, of course, the decline bias. I know personally, I have heard this throughout my life as I worked, talking to my grandparents. It's always there. And even now, going through this process post-pandemic, all the rest of it, we are very much inclined to a decline bias back in my day. Right, so before the pandemic, that's a decline bias. We are looking at the past and almost making it better than it was. So this is part of the decline bias, and it is also very much linked to our emotional state and how we think and feel about things. So we won't necessarily see the good things that came out of different elements. We only look back and see the bright shininess from yesteryear, and that one isn't serving us, and two, it might actually not be accurate, because we normally remember more the things that we enjoyed than the things that we didn't. As human beings, we don't like thinking about things we didn't enjoy. So if there's periods where we didn't enjoy it, we would actually block it out. So this bias only gives us a certain sort of framework that we're thinking in. So do take that into consideration. Then that, of course, brings us to our blind spots. So as we were going through the slides, you might have observed that there's quite a few of the biases that can play into blind spots. And as we can see here, basically what blind spots is for us as human beings, if we don't have the physical demonstration of it, but thinking about it more as a cognitive and emotional experience, we see that it is our circle of awareness. So whatever it is that we are aware of at this point in time. So if we are very low in emotional intelligence, our emotions that we might be aware of is very limited. And this is the ones that we're aware of. We might know that there is a little bit more emotions, but we might not know the amount or the extent to what they might change our thinking or be incorporated in our decision making. We might think that everything is cognitive, which, of course, we have discovered it is not. So our circle of awareness is really, really important. And hence why this lesson and the series of lessons to me is so important for our leaders as well as for our teams, because it highlights different elements within our awareness that we need to bring more to the forefront in order for us to create a bigger circle of awareness. As you guys can see, if the circle of awareness is very small, The known unknowns might also be only a very small portion, and then our blind spot or our unknown unknowns actually becomes quite big. And the bigger our circle of awareness becomes, the more we can actually see about ourselves, about our interactions, and about our teams, which means we can actually lead our teams so much better. So with awareness and helping us to actually improve our circle of awareness is firstly looking inside. So our own internal awareness, making sure that we know areas, for instance, that drain our energy and areas that we actually get a lot of energy. So that helps us to expose ourselves to the right environment in order for us to thrive, right? So knowing all these things, our personality, how we enjoy to interact in teams, how we enjoy to lead as a leader, all of these things go into that internal awareness bucket. Now, yes, we need to be internally aware and we need to be externally aware. So we need to have both. Only having one without the other one is not going to help us fully. And it will cause us to play more into the biases, as I mentioned before. So the external awareness is where feedback comes in. It's when we get feedback from our teams, it's having conversations with different team members and colleagues and people around us to find out how our behavior might be impacting them, how it might be showing up. I might feel nervous, but it shows up as aggression or being very pushy, maybe in the workplace. So knowing how I show up internally, and then also finding out how the person or people around me is actually experiencing it for themselves can show me a little bit around that blindness that we have, right? We experience it one way, they perceive it another way, and there's a truth somewhere in the middle. So we need to look at those things and get the external feedbacks. Now, ways that some companies get external feedback might be through 360s. There's also other ways that we can get external feedback that is very intentional and very, very deliberate on the type of feedback that we get, and we can actually action it in an effective manner. So when we're looking in our next lesson on feedback, we'll go a little bit deeper into some of these elements around how to actually get proper feedback and give proper feedback when we are working with our team. And then, of course, there is the element of stepping back and reflecting. So having both these sets of information or data points is helpful. And we also need to make sure that we incorporate it into our being and into our behaviors. And for us to do that, we need to step back. We need to reflect on what it is that we are learning and make sure that we actually preferably have an action plan that we say, okay, so this is the behavior I want to change. This is where it shows up most, and this is what I'm going to do next time. Of course, being mindful and kind to ourselves in this process. Change can take a wee while to actually be implemented properly. So being kind to ourselves are always a very good idea. And as we are kind to ourselves, also being kind to our teammates when they are learning new things. And this, of course, brings us to the overview. So looking at the overview, on the blind spot side, things to take into consideration is doing some reflection on our day. So for today, what sort of blind spots might have showed up for me and my team? Of course, getting some feedback around that, and finding out from my team what sort of blind spots is there, and also actually looking at my team. How diverse is my team? Do I only get viewpoints from one specific area? So, for instance, do I only have engineers on my team and I don't have any people that would be implementing this, or any people that would be maintaining it, or even people that would be consuming it, right? All of those different elements will give us a more holistic view of the thing that we're looking at. Then, of course, what practice or behavior is it that we want to change? How is it going to look like when it is new? And then we repeat the whole process. On our biases, it's really good to be able to name it, right? So if we are able to name it, we can then identify where it shows up. So knowing which biases might be able to show up within our workplace, you can take the 7 that we've discussed today, and they are a really good base to start with, and go and have a look in your workplace where you see them showing up. So identify that. Then think about strategies, how you can help to mitigate them. It is a little bit tricky because this is things that normally comes up for us in general. To totally eliminate them, we can mitigate them, and being aware of them helps us to mitigate them better and better. So look at how you can eliminate them. For instance, if we have a confirmation bias, having a more diverse team, or inviting people from other teams to come and sit on our team, and also giving them a voice. So we're actually getting that diverse perspectives. And then again, stepping back and having a look at what we have in general, so that we can actually implement these things, get some action strategies, and of course, review them to see how effective they were, and being intentional with what it is that we do. And that, for today, actually brings us to the end of our lesson. So if you guys want to get hold of me, you can email me at mariska@journeytodiscover.com. Or alternatively, I would love to connect with you, and we can connect via LinkedIn. And you can also, of course, find me on USA Global TV. We have loads of lessons on YouTube, and you can find me on my website, which is journeytodiscover.com. And remember, the 2 is the number 2.
Thank you so much. That was fantastic. I found myself relating to a lot of those biases. I love the way that you just really drew us in, and then have us give a thought about how this is applied or doesn't apply. And the visuals were great too. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
And I'm going to put up your banner just again for people. You can reach Mariska at her website. You can email her, journey2discover.com, or mariska@journeytodiscover.com, or via LinkedIn. All right. Thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you backstage.
And so do I. Thank you very much for today.
Thank you. See you later.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We had quite an incredible lineup of shows. Our shows this morning were very emotional. I've got a whole pile of handkerchiefs here, which I've been sharing from crying. And then we had 3 talking head shows. So it's been a fabulous day. Tomorrow, we have a new talking head presenter. Kathy Fulton will be joining us at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time. And then we will follow that up with our new show with Kathy also. And that is What's Trending. So we've We've got wonderful content. We're always looking for people to join us. If you'd like to book your session on any of our shows, you can go over to usaglobaltv.com and book your session. Also, if you're wondering how you can become a talking head on USA Global TV, we do have a spot for 2 more people. You can email us at info@usaglobaltv.com. All right, thank you so much. We're going to close out with a tribute to support people of Ukraine, and then we will be coming back tomorrow. So thank you again, much appreciated.
Well, this performance was not about ice dancing. It was deeper. It was rooted in who they are as people, where they live. It was not a made-up story. It was a real story brought to the ice. Not many words to be able to fairly and accurately describe what was.
Меня зовут Маша, мне 9 лет, я живу в Красногоровке, у меня все хорошо. Кушать у нас есть, пить у нас есть, сахар у нас есть, все есть. Только дров не хватает. На буржуйке, когда у нас есть, вот эти мы дрова пособираем, закинем, оно горит. Например, в 10 запалили, в 11 закончили, вода нагрелась, и все, и мы купаемся.
В наш дом 4 было прямых попаданий, так что мы боимся. Человека даже осколками поранило, забрали в больницу с 6-го подъезда соседа, так что мы тоже боимся, у нас много деток. Деваться нам некуда, нас никто нигде не ждет.
Когда вырасти, я хочу найти работу такую, чтобы я помогала людям, которые бедные, там